Um, Imagine for just a second that you're standing in the middle of a bustling, high-stakes corporate boardroom. Or, maybe you're at a really crowded networking event.
Right, the kind of place where you can barely hear yourself think over the noise.
Exactly. So who's the person you immediately identify as the leader in that room? Who's the one that just seems destined for success?
Well, if you're like almost everyone else in modern society, your brain instantly locks on to the loudest person in the room.
Yeah, the one who's dominating the conversation, cracking jokes, naturally holding court. They just seem completely unbothered by the spotlight.
Because we have this deeply ingrained, almost mathematical formula in our heads, we genuinely believe that volume equals confidence, and confidence automatically equals competence.
It's an incredibly powerful illusion, right? I mean, we find tremendous comfort in that kind of binary categorization.
We really do. We've structured our entire society around it. I mean, our schools, our workplaces, our entire social hierarchy is built on this exact assumption.
The assumption that being highly gregarious and relentlessly outward-facing is just the default requirement for success.
Right. And conversely, that being quiet or thoughtful or reserved is somehow a problem that needs to be fixed.
But when you actually start pulling at the threads of human behavior, when you look at the hard neuroscientific data, you realize this formula isn't just slightly flawed.
No, it is completely fundamentally broken. And honestly, that is exactly what we are going to dismantle today.
Yes, we are. For you listening right now, this deep dive is basically a blueprint. You're going to discover how to unlock your hidden strengths.
And you'll learn how to drastically improve your closest personal relationships and how to reach the absolute pinnacle of your career.
And the best part, you can do all of this without ever having to change the fundamental essence of who you are. We're getting to the bottom of this by exploring a truly paradigm-shifting source today.
It really is a game changer.
It's the book Quiet, The Power of Introverts in a World That Can't Stop Talking by Susan Cain.
It's a masterful piece of research, honestly. And the mission we have for today's deep dive is incredibly urgent.
Extremely urgent. Just look at the sheer mathematics of it.
Right, because between a third and a half of the global population are introverts. That is a massive chunk of humanity.
So that means either you, the person listening right now, are an introvert, or you are managing, living with, or married to one.
Exactly. So our goal today is to decode the actual literal biology of personality. We are going to completely shatter the myth that loud always equals successful.
And we're going to arm you with actionable, granular examples. That way you can apply this science to your daily life immediately.
But to really get our footing, we have to start with the water we are all swimming in.
Yeah, Susan Cain introduces a concept right away that she calls the extrovert ideal.
Right, the extrovert ideal. It's this omnipresent, totally invisible cultural belief system.
It dictates that the ideal self is naturally gregarious, aggressively alpha, and just thrives under the glare of public attention.
It's basically the assumption that action is always superior to contemplation, and that lightning-fast certainty is somehow always better than careful doubt.
And the really devastating side effect of this extrovert ideal is that it makes introverts feel like second-class citizens in their own lives.
It absolutely does. It creates this psychological environment where people feel immense pressure to artificially inflate their personalities.
Yeah, they feel forced to perform a version of themselves that directly contradicts their own nature.
But the most fascinating question to ask here isn't just what this ideal is, but, how on earth did we get here?
Because if you look back, society wasn't always obsessed with being loud and flashy. There was a very specific, very measurable historical pivot.
Right. We transitioned from what historians call the culture of character in the 19th century to the culture of personality in the 20th century.
Okay, let's unpack this shift because this part completely blew my mind when I read it.
It's wild, right? So if you look at the 19th century, the culture of character, the ideal self was serious, disciplined, and honorable.
Think of a figure like Abraham Lincoln. What truly mattered in that era wasn't the immediate dazzling impression you made at a dinner party.
Not at all. What mattered was how you behaved in private. It was about your moral rigor, your quiet endurance.
In fact, if you look at the self-help books from the 1800s, the buzzwords were things like citizenship, duty, hard work, honor, morals, and integrity.
The emphasis was entirely internal. Virtue was about doing the right thing, even if literally nobody was looking.
But then the 20th century arrives, and it brings this massive seismic shock. to the human experience.
Mass industrialization and urbanization. For the first time in history, on a really massive scale, people were leaving their small, tight-knit agricultural towns.
Towns where, everyone knew your family, your history, and your reputation from birth.
Exactly. And they were moving to massive, sprawling cities. They were suddenly walking onto factory floors and into corporate offices, surrounded by hundreds of complete strangers.
So your lifelong reputation suddenly means absolutely nothing.
Nothing at all. If you're standing in a crowd of 1,000 strangers in New York City in 1910, your internal integrity doesn't get you a job.
The only thing that gets you a job is the first impression you make in a 3-minute interview.
Right. The focus completely shifted to outer charm, to fascination, to whether you were a go-getter.
And there is no better embodiment of this massive cultural pivot than the story of Dale Carnegie.
Oh, Dale Carnegie's life is practically the origin story of the modern extrovert ideal.
He started out as this skinny, unathletic, incredibly insecure farm boy in rural Missouri.
And his parents were deeply rooted in that old culture of character. They had strict moral standards and really hoped he would pursue a quiet life in religion or education.
But Carnegie looked around and realized the rules of the game had fundamentally changed.
He noticed that the people who held the power, the respect, and the wealth weren't the quiet moralists anymore.
They were the public speakers. They were the men on the traveling lecture circuits who could stand on a stage and captivate an audience of total strangers.
So he obsessively studied them. He practiced projecting his voice. He changed his entire focus toward managing public perception.
And he literally transformed himself into an icon of public speaking and persuasion.
His journey from a quiet farm boy to the author of How to Win Friends and Influence People perfectly mirrors America's shift.
We went from valuing the quiet, dutiful citizen to worshiping the mighty, likable fellow.
And the self-help literature evolved right alongside him. Those 19th century words like honor and duty just vanished.
They were replaced by 20th century buzzwords like magnetic, fascinating, dominant, energetic.
Fast forward to today, and you can see the absolute extreme of this evolution in figures like Tony Robbins.
Oh, yeah. Cain actually describes attending one of Robbins' massive Unleash the Power Within seminars.
Right, where you have thousands of people paying exorbitant amounts of money to be packed into a stadium.
They're blasting high-energy music. People are jumping up and down, screaming, literally walking across hot coals.
They are essentially training themselves to be hyper-aggressive and hyper-extroverted.
Exactly. But the danger isn't the seminar itself, right? It's the underlying philosophy it represents.
Precisely. We have reached a point where extreme extroversion and aggressive salesmanship aren't just seen as tools for financial gain.
We have mistakenly equated those traits with being a genuinely good person and a fundamentally strong leader.
Okay, I have to push back on this a little bit just to play devil's advocate.
Sure, go ahead.
Because when you describe that historical shift moving into crowded cities, competing for jobs among thousands of strangers, isn't the culture of personality just a necessary biological adaptation?
Like a survival mechanism.
Yeah. If you are living in a hyper-competitive modern metropolis, don't you have to be loud simply to survive? If you don't wave your arms and shout, you'll just be trampled. Isn't this just the reality of the environment we built?
Well, it's a very fair point, and yes, standing out did become a practical necessity in anonymous urban environments. But here is where the adaptation became a pathology.
What do you mean by pathology?
It created an oppressive standard that actively harms our collective decision-making. We began to make a massive, systematic error in how we evaluate human intelligence.
Oh, I see. We started confusing the presentation of an idea with the actual quality of an idea.
Exactly. We fall completely for the polish.
We do. Psychological studies consistently demonstrate a phenomenon called the halo effect regarding speech.
We subconsciously rate people who speak quickly, loudly, and with immense confidence as being more intelligent.
Right. We assume they are way more competent than those who speak slowly or hesitantly.
But here is the critical beta point that should give everyone listening pause. Research shows absolutely zero correlation between the gift of gab and having genuinely good ideas.
None whatsoever. A person's ability to effortlessly dominate a conversation has no statistical relationship to their actual problem-solving ability.
Or the accuracy of their insights, which means we are routinely promoting the wrong people.
And this is where you, the listener, need to take a hard look at your own environment.
Think about your workplace or the board you sit on, or even just your social circle.
Are you genuinely rewarding the person who is generating the most innovative, structurally sound ideas?
Or are you just handing the keys over to the person who speaks the fastest and loudest during the Monday morning meeting?
Recognizing this blind spot is the crucial first step to stop penalizing the deep, careful thinkers in your life.
Because when we penalize those quiet thinkers, we aren't just fighting against a social preference. We're actually fighting against human biology.
And this brings up the most common question introverts get asked. People always say, well, if society demands that you be loud and extroverted, why don't you just learn to do it? Just practice.
Just put yourself out there more. It's the classic, well-meaning, but totally ignorant advice.
And the reason that advice is so destructive is because you cannot simply practice away your fundamental temperament.
Because it is quite literally hardwired into your nervous system.
To really understand why, we have to look at one of the most fascinating longitudinal studies in the history of psychology.
Oh, the Jerome Kagan study, right. This is incredible.
Yeah, it was conducted by developmental psychologist Jerome Kagan starting back in 1989. Kagan wanted to find the biological root of human personality.
So he designed this brilliant experiment. He brought in hundreds of 4-month-old infants.
Now, 4 months old is incredibly young. These babies haven't been heavily socialized yet. Their reactions are pure biology.
And what he does to these babies is fascinating. He doesn't just watch them sleep.
No, he exposes them to a carefully curated series of novel stimuli. He plays recordings of voices. He pops balloons right next to them.
He waves cotton swabs soaked in alcohol under their noses. He essentially introduces them to a chaotic, noisy, highly stimulating environment.
And then he meticulously records their physical reactions. The results completely shattered the conventional wisdom of the time.
Kagan found that the babies split roughly into 2 extreme groups. About 20% were what he called high reactive.
Right. When the balloon popped or the strange voice played, these high reactive babies thrashed their arms and legs.
They pumped their fists, they cried, their heart rates spiked, their nervous systems were going absolutely haywire.
Then you had the other extreme, about 40% of the babies who were low reactive.
The balloon would pop, and they would just lie there peacefully. They might calmly turn their head to see where the noise came from, but they didn't cry.
Their limbs stayed relaxed. They were completely unbothered by the chaos.
Now, if you asked the average person on the street to predict the future of these babies, almost everyone gets it wrong.
Because intuition tells us that the baby who is thrashing, screaming, and making a massive racket is going to grow up to be the loud, aggressive extrovert.
And the quiet, peaceful baby will naturally be the quiet introvert.
But the reality is the exact opposite. Kagan followed these exact same children as they grew up at age 2, 4, 7, and all the way into adulthood.
The babies who cried and thrashed at the popping balloons grew up to be the quiet, careful, cautious introverts.
And the peaceful, unbothered babies grew up to be the bold, outgoing, risk-taking extroverts.
Which forces us to ask, why? What is the biological mechanism driving this paradox?
The answer lies deep in the brain, specifically in a structure called the amygdala, which acts as the brain's emotional switchboard.
The high reactive babies had highly excitable amygdalas. Their nervous systems were incredibly porous and sensitive to the environment.
Here is the absolute best way to visualize this. Imagine that the human nervous system is a thermometer.
Okay, a thermometer. I love this analogy.
All right, introverts are not broken extroverts. They are highly sensitive, ultra-precision thermometers.
A high reactive baby has a nervous system that registers every single fractional drop or rise in temperature.
They notice the hum of the fluorescent lights, the subtle shift in someone's tone of voice, the sheer volume of data in a crowded room.
Because they absorb so much sensory information so quickly, they reach their maximum capacity fast.
Exactly. The thrashing and crying is an extroversion. It's sensory overload.
They become introverts because they have to retreat to quiet environments just to protect their deeply sensitive nervous systems from frying.
That perfectly explains the low reactive babies, too. Their internal thermometers are much less sensitive.
They require a massive swing in temperature, like a huge amount of external stimulation, for their brains to even register that something is happening.
So as they grow up, they actively seek out loud music, crowded parties, and high-risk situations.
Because without that extreme stimulation, they feel lethargic and chronically bored.
It's all about finding what psychologists call the optimal level of arousal. Extroverts and introverts just have entirely different biological sweet spots.
And there's this Brilliantly simple study the book mentions to prove this, the lemon juice test.
Oh, this is fascinating. If you take an introvert and an extrovert, and you place a single drop of lemon juice on their tongues.
The introvert will literally produce significantly more saliva. The exact same physical stimulus produces a wildly different, measurable biological reaction.
And this biological sensitivity isn't a defect, it's a profoundly evolved trait.
Right. The research of Dr. Elaine Aron, on what she calls the highly sensitive person, or HSP, shows that this high reactivity comes with incredible cognitive advantages.
Highly sensitive introverts process information much more deeply. They are highly empathetic, incredibly conscientious, and meticulously observant.
And we even see this encoded in our DNA. Researchers have identified specific genetic markers associated with this temperament.
For example, there's a variant of a gene called 5-HT-TLPR, which affects how the brain regulates serotonin.
What's incredible is that we see this exact same gene variant in rhesus monkeys.
Yeah, in a troop of monkeys, the ones with this introvert gene are the quiet, careful observers.
They don't rush into the center of the clearing to fight for dominance. They hang back at the edges.
And from an evolutionary standpoint, the troop absolutely relies on them.
Because while the loud, aggressive monkeys are distracted by fighting, the quiet, observant monkeys are the ones who notice the leopard hiding in the grass.
They're the early warning system for the entire community.
When we translate this biology to your everyday life, it gives you a massive tactical advantage.
You absolutely need to identify your own biological sweet spot.
If you are sitting at your desk and you feel inexplicably anxious, deeply overwhelmed, or completely unable to focus, you shouldn't berate yourself for lacking discipline.
No, you are likely biologically overstimulated. You need to physically alter your environment to lower the temperature.
Put on noise-canceling headphones, turn off your email notifications, or literally just move to a quiet room.
Conversely, if you feel sluggish, uninspired, or totally checked out, your nervous system is starving for input.
You need to get up, go to a bustling coffee shop, or put on high-energy music. Managing your biology is the foundation of peak performance.
But this naturally leads us to a massive contradiction.
Right, if introverts are biologically wired to be sensitive, cautious, and observant, how on earth does that translate to success in a modern world that demands aggressive, charismatic leadership?
We're told you need to be a commanding general to get things done.
But the truth is, introversion translates into a completely different and often vastly superior type of power. We're talking about soft power.
We have completely swallowed the myth of charismatic leadership whole.
We believe that to command a room, you have to pound the table, interrupt people, and deliver soaring, spontaneous oratory.
But Cain gives us a perfect, real-world counterexample in the story of Laura, a quiet, soft-spoken Wall Street lawyer.
Laura's story is incredible because she is the exact opposite of the Wall Street stereotype.
She found herself tasked with leading a high-stakes negotiation against a group of incredibly aggressive, intimidating, classic alpha male investment bankers.
The tension in the room is palpable. The bankers are puffing out their chests, raising their voices, and trying to physically and psychologically dominate the space.
Yeah, conventional wisdom would tell Laura that she needs to match their energy. She needs to yell back, slam her fist on the table, and show them who's boss.
But Laura didn't do that, because that wasn't authentic to her biology. Instead, she used what the book brilliantly calls negotiation jujitsu.
I love that term. Instead of meeting force with force, she simply sat there quietly.
When the bankers made outrageous, aggressive demands, she didn't get angry. She just calmly asked incredibly precise, analytical questions.
She'd ask, well, why exactly do you need that specific concession? What is the mathematical basis for that number?
She listened intently to their blustering answers, spotted the logical flaws, and methodically dismantled their arguments without ever once raising her voice.
Her quiet persistence completely neutralized their aggression. It changed the entire dynamic of the room.
The bankers eventually ran out of steam because they had nothing to push back against.
Laura not only secured a phenomenal deal for her clients, but her display of soft power was so impressive that the opposing counsel literally offered her a job the next day.
That's amazing. Even the aggressive bankers eventually hired her firm for future deals.
Because when millions of dollars are on the line, people don't actually want an ego-driven yeller. They want someone who can observe carefully and solve the problem.
And we see this exact same dynamic in world-changing historical movements. Just look at Rosa Parks.
When we think of the heroes of the civil rights movement, we usually think of towering orators.
But the people who actually knew Rosa Parks described her as petite, shy, and incredibly quiet.
She possessed what they called a radical humility and a quiet fortitude.
When Rosa Parks refused to give up her seat on that bus in Montgomery, she didn't stand up and deliver a fiery political speech.
She didn't scream or fight the police. She simply said a quiet, unshakable no.
And it was precisely her gentle, introverted nature that made her act of defiance so universally powerful.
If a loud, aggressive agitator had refused to move, it would have been easy for the opposition to dismiss them as just a troublemaker.
But Rosa Parks's quiet dignity was just impenetrable.
It also highlights the beautiful symbiotic necessity of introverts and extroverts working together.
Yes, Rosa Parks had the quiet fortitude to trigger the movement, but she wasn't the one to stand at the podium and rally the masses.
That required the booming, charismatic extroversion of Martin Luther King Jr. He couldn't have sparked the boycott with the same gentle grace. And she couldn't have delivered the I have a dream speech. They needed each other's specific type of power.
And this concept of introverted effectiveness isn't just a historical anecdote. It's backed by rigorous data.
Organizational psychologist Adam Grant conducted a fascinating study to test the myth of extroverted leadership.
And to do it, he used a remarkably simple task-folding T-shirts.
I really love the methodology of this study. Grant set up multiple teams to fold shirts as fast as possible.
Some teams were led by naturally extroverted leaders and some by introverted leaders.
But here was the twist. The employees on the teams were actually actors, secretly instructed by Grant to behave in two specific ways.
Right, half the teams had passive employees who just quietly followed orders.
The other half had proactive employees who actively suggested better, faster ways to fold the shirts.
The results completely upend how we think about management. When the employees were passive, the extroverted leaders performed brilliantly. Their natural charisma and high energy inspired the passive workers to move faster.
But when the employees were proactive, when they were bringing their own ideas to the table, the teams with extroverted leaders saw their productivity just plummet.
Wait, really? Why did it plummet?
Because the extroverted leaders felt threatened. When the proactive employees suggested a new method, the extroverted leaders perceived it as a challenge to their dominance.
Oh, wow. So they ended up shutting down the good ideas just to maintain their status as the loudest voice in the room?
Yeah.
They suffocated the team's potential?
Exactly. But the introverted leaders had the exact opposite result. When they managed the proactive employees, productivity skyrocketed.
Because introverted leaders don't have an innate biological need to dominate the social space, they didn't feel threatened by their team's initiative.
They listened carefully to the suggestions, realized the new folding method was actually more efficient, and implemented it.
They created a virtuous circle where employees felt heard and valued, which made them work even harder.
This maps perfectly onto the difference between Western and Asian communication styles that Cain explores in the book.
Western corporate culture demands fire assertiveness, visible dominance, aggressively claiming credit.
But many Eastern cultures value soft power, which is more like water.
Right, water doesn't smash a rock to pieces. It flows around it, patiently eroding it over time until the rock gives way.
It's about subordinating your own ego for the success of the group.
So if you are listening to this and you find yourself in a management position, this brings up a massive strategic question.
Absolutely.
If I am a naturally quiet, observant manager and I get assigned to lead a team full of highly proactive, loud, dominant extroverts, shouldn't I try to match their volume?
It's tempting to think so.
Don't I need to bark orders just to establish my authority so they don't just walk all over me?
The data strongly suggests you should do the exact opposite. If you try to fake being an aggressive extrovert, your team will immediately sense the inauthenticity.
And you will physically exhaust yourself in the process.
The supreme superpower of the introverted leader is their ability to sit down so that others can stand up.
Your authority won't come from the volume of your voice. It will come from your ability to synthesize their ideas and calmly direct their chaotic energy toward the correct goal.
So in your actual everyday life, try this experiment during your very next team meeting.
Especially if you usually feel that awful pressure to speak up just to prove you are participating.
Instead of fighting for airtime, consciously step back. Let the loud folks get everything out of their system.
Then, leverage your introverted power by asking 3 incredibly thoughtful, synthesizing questions.
Don't offer a sweeping speech. Just ask the questions that expose the flaws or clarify the direction.
You will be amazed at how quickly the entire room pivots to look at you as the anchor of the meeting, simply because you chose to direct the flow rather than drown in it.
That precise ability to step back, detach from the social noise, and engage in deep observation doesn't just make introverts excellent leaders.
If we pull the lens back, we realize that this capacity for solitude is actually the fundamental engine of human creativity.
Which leads us to a massive systemic problem in the modern world: the utter destruction of privacy and the rise of the new groupthink.
It really feels like over the last few decades, institutions have declared an all-out war on being alone.
You walk into almost any modern tech company or corporate headquarters, and what do you see? Massive open-plan offices.
No walls, no doors, just endless rows of desks where everyone can see and hear everything you do.
We've done the exact same thing to kids. Classrooms are no longer rows of individual desks. They are clusters of pods where kids are forced to do every single assignment as a committee.
We have elevated group brainstorming to the level of a religious sacrament. We honestly believe that if you shove 10 people into a glass room with a whiteboard, sheer magic will just happen.
But decades of rigorous psychological research on creativity tell a completely different, very dark story.
This obsession with constant, inescapable collaboration is literally killing innovation.
The data consistently shows that the most spectacularly creative people in almost every field are overwhelmingly introverted.
And the reason for this is actually very simple. True creativity demands intense, uninterrupted isolation.
Why is that? Because group dynamics instantly introduce social pressure.
When you are brainstorming in a group, your brain isn't just trying to solve the math problem or write the code.
A massive chunk of your cognitive bandwidth is secretly monitoring the social hierarchy.
You're sitting there wondering, is the boss going to think my idea is stupid? Am I talking too much? Am I talking too little?
People unconsciously conform to the opinions of the most dominant person in the room. You don't end up with the best idea, you end up with the loudest person's idea.
To really understand how peak performance actually works, we have to look at the work of psychologist Anders Ericsson.
He's the pioneer of the concept known as deliberate practice.
Ericsson studied elite performers across multiple domains: world-class violinists, Olympic athletes, chess grandmasters.
He found that achieving true mastery requires thousands of hours of deliberate practice. But here is the critical detail that everyone misses.
Ericsson insists that deliberate practice must be done entirely alone.
Think about a chess grandmaster. They don't become a grandmaster by playing casual games with 5 friends in a noisy park.
No, they spend thousands of hours sitting alone in a silent room, studying archival games, analyzing their own specific weaknesses.
Because when you are alone, you don't have to manage anyone else's feelings. You don't have to keep up with someone else's pace.
You can ruthlessly focus on the exact micro skill that you are bad at.
A perfect historical embodiment of this is Steve Wozniak, the man who engineered the first Apple computer.
We love the myth of the brilliant collaborative duo Jobs and Wozniak brainstorming in a garage.
But the reality of the invention itself is profoundly solitary. Wozniak built the Apple I while working at Hewlett-Packard.
He would wake up at 6:30 in the morning, commute to his cubicle, and work in absolute, uninterrupted solitude.
He later explicitly advised aspiring inventors that they must work alone. He warned that you cannot invent revolutionary products by committee.
You need the silence to follow your own strange, unconventional thoughts to their logical conclusion.
It makes me think of an analogy. Group brainstorming is like trying to paint a masterpiece with 10 people all holding the exact same paintbrush at the same time.
One person wants to paint a tree, the other wants to paint a mountain, and you just end up with a muddy brown smear on the canvas.
To get a masterpiece, you absolutely need the solitary artist to retreat to their studio, lock the door, and paint the vision alone.
Only after the painting is finished should you invite the group in to give feedback, figure out how to frame it, and decide how to sell it.
That is exactly how the process should work. Introverts naturally excel at this initial solitary phase because their biology makes them highly resistant to social FOMO.
Right, the fear of missing out. They aren't distracted by the desperate need to socialize or navigate office politics.
They have an immense natural reservoir of concentration.
So how do you practically defend your creativity in a world of open-plan offices and endless Slack messages?
You have to become absolutely ruthless about your calendar.
Take a look at your workday tomorrow. Identify the single most difficult, cognitively demanding task you have.
Now, proactively block out 2 hours of completely solitary time to tackle it.
Book a conference room just for yourself, or negotiate with your boss to work from home for the morning. Refuse to do the deep work by committee.
Do the hard thinking alone, and then bring your polished ideas to the group.
But as empowering as it is to claim your solitude, we have to ground this in reality.
Right, because we do not live in isolated cabins in the woods.
We live in a deeply interconnected, highly socialized economy. We have to go to networking events, we have to pitch to clients, we have to attend our spouse's company holiday party.
Which brings us to the existential survival question for introverts. How do you navigate all of this mandatory extroversion without completely burning out your nervous system?
This was the part of the deep dive that literally changed how I view my own personality. It's a concept developed by Professor Brian Little called free trait theory.
It completely reframes the idea that our personalities are fixed prisons. Little proposes the rubber band theory of personality.
Yes, we are born with fixed biological temperaments. We just spent a long time discussing the high reactive amygdalas.
But like a rubber band, we possess the incredible capacity to stretch those traits far beyond their natural resting state.
Little argues that we are perfectly capable of acting wildly out of character. An introvert can act like a booming, charismatic extrovert.
But there is a strict condition for this to be sustainable. We can only stretch the rubber band if we're doing it in the service of what he calls core personal projects.
Core personal projects are the things that give your life profound meaning. It could be a career you believe in, a person you love deeply, or a moral value you hold sacred.
For example, an introverted scientist who hates public speaking might happily get on a stage and deliver a dynamic, highly extroverted TED Talk because she passionately believes her research could cure a disease.
Or an introverted father might throw a massive, noisy birthday party for his daughter because seeing her happy is his core project. The passion for the project overrides the biological discomfort.
However, physics tells us that if you keep a rubber band stretched to its absolute limit for too long, it will eventually snap.
Acting out of character exacts a severe toll on the autonomic nervous system.
If an introvert forces themselves to act like an extrovert for 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, they will experience a cascade of physical consequences.
Chronic fatigue, weakened immune response, and severe psychological burnout.
Which is why Professor Little developed a crucial coping mechanism, the restorative niche.
And Little himself is the perfect case study for this. He is a deeply biologically extreme introvert.
Yet he was famous for giving these incredibly passionate, hilarious, highly extroverted lectures to hundreds of university students.
He stretched his rubber band because teaching was his core project. But the biological cost was devastating.
Immediately after his lecture ended, he couldn't handle casual small talk with students.
He would literally run away and hide inside a bathroom stall, just sitting there in the quiet breathing, waiting for his nervous system to stop vibrating.
That bathroom stall was his restorative niche.
And it is vital to understand that the dangers of unchecked extroversion aren't just limited to individual burnout.
When we force everyone to act like an extrovert, there is a massive systemic cost.
Cain brilliantly points to the 2008 Wall Street financial crash as a macro example of what happens when a culture is entirely dominated by the extrovert ideal.
This is a really fascinating lens to view the crash through.
It is entirely neurological. Remember how extroverts need massive stimulation to feel anything.
Their brains are highly sensitive to rewards, particularly the dopamine rush that comes with money, status, and winning.
When an extrovert is chasing a goal, they experience a psychological state called the buzz. It's a euphoric, aggressive high.
And when you are high on the buzz, your brain physically downregulates its sensitivity to danger. You become practically blind to risk.
Wall Street in the early 2000s actively filtered out cautious introverts and exclusively hired aggressive, go-go extroverts.
The entire financial system became addicted to the buzz, took astronomical risks, and drove the global economy off a cliff.
Because they had no brakes. The brains of introverts are quite literally geared the opposite way.
They're designed to constantly inspect the environment for trouble. They are far more sensitive to warning signs than to rewards.
In any healthy ecosystem, whether it's a corporate board, a government, or a financial market, you absolutely need those cautious introverts.
They are the canaries in the coal mine. They're the ones saying, wait, look at the math here. This housing bubble is going to burst.
So when we bring this back down to the individual level, it presents a very tricky balancing act.
It really does.
Right, because if I'm listening to this, I'm thinking, okay, I understand free trait theory.
Right.
I can fake being an extrovert to charm the client, land the big account, and get the promotion.
But I know I'm going to pay a heavy neurological tax. So how do I know when I'm stretching the rubber band too far?
How do I know when I'm just straight up living a lie?
The litmus test is always your core personal projects. If you are faking extroversion for a cause or a job that you fundamentally do not care about, you are going to burn out spectacularly.
If you're forcing yourself to be an aggressive salesperson purely for the paycheck, but you secretly believe the product is terrible, that cognitive dissonance will destroy you.
But even if you deeply love your project, the golden rule is that you must actively negotiate for your downtime. You cannot act out of character 100% of the time.
This is where you must meticulously design your own restorative niches. Think about your daily routine right now. Where are the pockets of absolute silence where you drop the mask?
It could be a 15-minute solitary walk around the block after a massive client pitch. It could be escaping to your parked car during your lunch break just to sit in silence.
It could be putting on noise-canceling headphones the second you get on the commuter train.
You have to locate and fiercely protect these temporal and physical spaces to recharge, otherwise the extrovert ideal will consume you.
And this desperate need for a restorative niche doesn't magically vanish when we leave the office.
In fact, it leads us to the final and perhaps most intimate territory of our deep dive today.
This biological difference in how we process stimulation is the root cause of almost every major conflict in our personal relationships and inside our own homes.
We have to dismantle a truly toxic myth right now. There is this widespread assumption that extroverts are inherently pro-social, meaning they naturally love people and connection.
And that introverts are inherently antisocial, meaning they secretly hate people and want to be left alone.
This is completely false. Introverts are not antisocial, they are simply differently social.
It really comes down to the currency of connection. Extroverts seek social impact. They want to be at the center of the web.
They derive energy from interacting with a large number of acquaintances, telling stories to a crowd, and feeling the dynamic, bouncing energy of a group.
Introverts, on the other hand, seek intimacy. They crave deep, meaningful one-on-one connections.
They would much rather have a 3-hour conversation about philosophy with a single best friend than make small talk with 50 strangers.
Cain illustrates how this clash plays out in domestic life with the story of a married couple, Emily and Greg.
And I guarantee almost everyone listening has lived some version of this exact dynamic.
Emily is an introvert. She works a high-pressure, highly stimulating job all week. By Friday evening, her nervous system is completely fried.
Her idea of a perfect restorative Friday night is having a quiet dinner with just Greg, maybe reading a book and decompressing in silence.
But Greg is an extrovert. For him, sitting in a quiet office all week is understimulating. He feels lethargic.
By Friday evening, his nervous system is screaming for input. His idea of relaxing and recharging is to invite 4 other couples over for a massive loud dinner party with music and wine.
And instantly, you have a vicious cycle of misunderstanding and resentment.
Greg looks at Emily hiding in the bedroom and thinks, why is my wife being so antisocial? Why is she being such a wet blanket?
And Emily looks at Greg planning the party and thinks, why is my husband so insensitive? Why doesn't he respect my need for peace? Why is he torturing me?
So the natural pushback here is often quite cynical. People hear this and think, well, it sounds like an introvert and an extrovert should simply never date or marry each other.
It's a profound question. How do you possibly bridge a gap where one person's neurological relaxation is the other person's literal neurological torture? How do you fix that?
The absolute most critical step is removing the moral judgment from the equation. Neither Greg nor Emily is wrong.
Greg isn't shallow, and Emily isn't a misanthrope. They just have completely different biological needs.
The breakthrough happens when extroverts like Greg finally understand the hidden cognitive cost of group socialization.
When an introvert is at a dinner party with 10 people, their brain isn't just relaxing, it is aggressively multitasking.
It is reading the micro-expressions of 10 different faces. It is tracking multiple overlapping conversations. It is figuring out when to jump in without interrupting. And it is filtering out the background music.
It is an Olympic-level cognitive workout, and it physically drains their battery.
Once you understand that biological reality, you realize that the solution isn't fighting about if you will socialize. It's compromising on how you socialize.
Emily and Greg can reach an understanding. Maybe they agree to host a dinner party every other week instead of every week.
And the crucial caveat is that Emily has total guilt-free permission to quietly excuse herself at 10:00 p.m. and go read in the bedroom.
And Greg promises not to view it as a personal insult or an antisocial slight.
It requires a profound level of empathy. You have to audit your closest relationships through this biological lens.
If your partner or your best friend routinely wants to leave events early or needs a day of total silence on the weekend, You have to stop taking it personally.
It is not a rejection of your love, it is simply the maintenance of their nervous system.
That is the ultimate takeaway to apply to your own life today. Have an open, radically honest conversation with the people closest to you.
Explain your optimal arousal levels. Tell them, I love you, but my battery is completely empty right now, and I need an hour in the quiet.
Do it completely free of guilt, shame, or judgment.
If we synthesize everything we've explored during this deep dive, from the high reactive babies to the myth of the loud leader to the necessity of restorative niches, the grand unifying theory is this.
And what's that?
The secret to a successful maximized life is simply putting yourself in the right lighting.
That's beautifully put. For some people, the right lighting is the blinding hot glare of a Broadway spotlight, surrounded by a roaring crowd.
But for others, the right lighting is the soft, warm glow of a lamplit desk in a quiet room with a pen, a piece of paper, and the space to think.
Recognizing your own nature is the only way to build a life where your genuine strengths can actually take root and flourish.
Absolutely.
And as we wrap up, I want to leave you with a final provocative thought, something to mull over the next time you feel overwhelmed by the sheer volume of the modern world.
We live in an era where hyperconnection is ruthlessly enforced. Every single second, our phones are buzzing, social media algorithms are screaming at us, and millions of voices are frantically fighting to be the loudest in the room.
What if the ultimate, most powerful act of rebellion in our relentlessly noisy world isn't trying to outshout the crowd?
What if true world-altering bravery isn't found in a microphone, but in having the profound, unshakable courage to simply remain quiet?
To retreat to your solitude, to do the deep, meaningful work in the shadows, and to trust that the sheer gravity of your intellect and your substance will eventually speak for itself.
That is a perspective that could completely reorient how a generation measures its own worth.
Before we sign off, we have to ask a massive favor of you. If you found value, clarity, or comfort in today's deep dive, please take a second to subscribe to the channel.
Subscribing doesn't just help us keep the lights on and keep making these deep dives, it genuinely, mathematically helps other people.
When you interact with this content, you signal to the algorithm that this message matters. You force the platform to push this deep dive into the feeds of people who might be sitting in a noisy office right now, feeling completely overwhelmed, wondering what is wrong with them.
You are helping them find the exact message they desperately need to hear. It's an incredibly powerful way to pay it forward.
And if you are ready to explore the deep science, the historical case studies, and the full scope of this fascinating topic, you need to hear the source material itself.
Check the description below. We have left exact instructions on how you can listen to the audiobook of Quiet, The Power of Introverts in a World That Can't Stop Talking completely for free.
Thank you so much for exploring the quiet corners of the mind with us today. Protect your solitude, find your perfect lighting, and we will catch you on the next deep dive.